Brian Austin Green and Megan Fox's public image was the very definition of Hollywood royalty. Red carpet walks under a fanfare of flashbulbs, whispered interviews praising each other's talents, and perfectly timed social media posts that painted a portrait of unbreakable devotion. In the early days, their chemistry blazed as fiercely as the spotlight they shared. He, the former teen heartthrob turned grounded family man. She, the breakout star whose confidence and charisma lit up every frame. Together, they seemed unstoppable, partners in life and art. Their love story, a beacon for fans who yearned to believe that true devotion still existed beneath the veneer of fame. Behind the cameras, they retreated to a sprawling Los Angeles estate, tucked behind high hedges and wrought iron gates. Inside, the decor was a mix of cozy California modern and personal mementos. Family photographs on floating shelves, a glossy piano in the music room, and framed posters from Megan's earliest indie projects. To Brian, this house was more than walls and windows. It was the sanctuary where they celebrated birthdays, hosted Thanksgiving dinners, and laughed late into the night over board games. Here, Megan let down her guard, trading couture gowns for sweatpants and homemade dinners, and Brian reminded her of the world beyond movie sets and magazine covers. But as Megan's star continued its upward trajectory, the rhythms of their shared life began to shift. Early morning calls from studio executives, sunset fittings for high-profile campaigns, and week-long location shoots in distant cities gradually eroded the steady routine they once cherished. Brian, accustomed to being her steadfast anchor, found himself waking to empty pillows and quiet halls. He filled his days with school runs for their son, script meetings, and gym sessions. But each evening, he returned to a house that felt half forgotten. Notifications would ping softly from Megan's phone. Running late with wardrobe, can't talk, you know why, love you. The words stung less for their content than for the space they revealed between them. Subtle signs multiplied, Megan slipping her phone into a messenger bag whenever Brian entered the room, stepping outside for private video calls, or brushing off his attempts at impromptu date nights with promises of just one more take. Their calendar was once peppered with shared events, film premieres, family barbecues, charity galas. But now it resembled parallel timelines, her obligations drawn in bold, his obligations penciled in smaller type. At first, Brian chalked it up to a demanding schedule. He reminded himself that ambition was part of Megan's essence. She thrived under pressure, and he loved her all the more for her drive. Yet the more he excused her absences, the more a quiet dread gnawed at him. He noticed how she lingered in makeup trailers long after the rest of the crew dispersed, how her laughter sometimes sounded distant on FaceTime calls, and how the same Adonis-like assistant always seemed to step forward with a fresh cup of coffee. Brian's heart tightened every time he caught a glimpse of that bodyguard-turned-companion, exchanging knowing smiles with Megan as the cameras rolled. His questions, innocent at first, began to edge toward confrontation. Who was that? Is everything okay? Why did you hide your phone? Each inquiry was met with a strained smile or a brusque half-answer that served only to deepen his suspicions. One evening, after a charity screening, Brian returned home alone. The grand foyer echoed with silence. No one bounded down the stairs to greet him. He wandered through rooms illuminated by moonlight filtering through curtains, calling Megan's name until his voice cracked. In the living room, he found her script pages scattered across the coffee table, alongside an empty mug with lipstick stains, far too many for one night. He sank onto the couch, running his hand over faded photographs, the day they met on set, the smile frozen in time as they announced their engagement, the family portraits from their first red carpet debut together. All of it felt achingly close and yet unreachable. As dawn approached, Brian sat by the window, watching traffic hum along Sunset Boulevard. In that hush before morning, he resolved to confront the growing distance between them. He knew that behind every lie, however small, lay a kernel of truth waiting to be unearthed. And though he wasn't yet certain what lay ahead, he sensed that their idyllic world was on the verge of a fracture, one that would test every promise they had ever made. Part 2 would bring the first real cracks in their fairy tale. But for now, Brian braced himself for the questions he could no longer avoid. Brian woke before sunrise, haunted by the echoes of unanswered questions. The previous night's resolve to confront Megan had dissolved in the haze of exhaustion and doubt. He spent hours pacing the length of their bedroom, tracing familiar paths in the dark, each turn revealing a memory. The inside joke shared under the covers, the soft hum of their son's breathing in the adjacent room, the way Megan's hand fit perfectly into his. Yet those precious moments now felt irretrievably distant. Determined to hold on to the life they had built together, Brian tried to reclaim an ordinary morning. He brewed coffee in their kitchen, the rich aroma a small comfort against the gnawing tension in his chest. He placed a steaming mug on the counter alongside a handwritten note. "Let's have breakfast tonight, just us." He signed it with a kiss mark from a lipstick-stained napkin. By mid-afternoon, he checked his phone incessantly for her reply, but the screen remained stubbornly blank. That evening, Megan slipped quietly into the house after a 16-hour shoot. Under the soft glow of the chandelier, she paused at the threshold, surprised to find Brian seated at the table, 2 empty chairs set for dinner. He offered a tentative smile. "Hey," he said. "I thought we could eat here, talk." She murmured an apology, claiming fatigue, and retreated to their bedroom. Brian listened to her footsteps fade away, then pushed his chair back, heart pounding with frustration and fear. Over the next few days, the pattern repeated itself. Her absence, his longing. Brian found himself drawn to her phone whenever she left it unattended, hovering over the lock screen, his thumb aching to swipe open the hidden world behind the pin. He caught glimpses of cryptic notifications. "Meet me in 15. Can't wait to see you," and emojis he had never used with her. Each alert felt like a betrayal, each unread message a widening gulf. He questioned his own integrity as he debated peeking. Guilt battled curiosity, but ultimately curiosity won. A late-night text from one of Megan's longtime friends, Caroline, provided fuel to his suspicions. Caroline, a former co-star, casually mentioned wondering when Megan would introduce her new muse, an artist whose paintings had captured Megan's admiration. Brian's mind conjured an all-too-vivid scenario. A handsome painter lingering in Megan's trailer, their eyes locked across canvases and whispers. He swallowed bile as he imagined the intimacy that had previously belonged only to him. Unable to bear the waiting game, Brian resolved to follow Megan the next morning. He borrowed a motorcycle from a friend, one that he knew she would not associate with him, and tracked her to a trendy coffee shop on Melrose Avenue. He parked a block away and watched from behind sunglasses as she entered, glancing over her shoulder with a self-conscious smile. Moments later, a sleek black SUV pulsed to a stop in front of the cafe, and a tall man in designer jeans, his back to Brian, stepped out. Megan and the stranger greeted each other with a brief hug that lingered too long. From Brian's vantage point, the man placed a gentle hand at the small of her back, guiding her inside as though they shared private territory. Brian's pulse thundered as he approached the window, only to see Megan lean forward, lips almost brushing his. Their conversation was muted by glass, but he saw her hand rest atop his, a gesture of trust, or something more intimate. His hands clenched into fists, knuckles whitening. Shaken, Brian retreated to his bike and sped home, every traffic light a torment. He replayed the scene on loop, haunted by the image of Megan's laughter blending with another man's voice. By dusk, he sat on the edge of their bed, phone in hand, torn between calling her out and giving their marriage one last chance to heal. The weight of silence pressed against him, thick and suffocating. As night deepened, Brian drafted a message, straightforward, vulnerable. "I saw you today. We need to talk." His thumb hovered over send for what felt like an eternity. In that moment, he knew nothing would ever be the same. Tomorrow would bring answers, but first he had to confront the truth he had chased across Los Angeles. The fracture in their fairy tale was no longer a distant tremor. It had become an earthquake, and he braced himself for the collapse. Brian's message blinked on Megan's phone all day. "We need to talk, now." By late afternoon, she finally responded, asking him to meet at their favorite coffee shop, a small, quiet bistro halfway between the studio and their home. When he arrived, Megan was already there, shoulders hunched beneath a leather jacket, her eyes red from crying. He slid into the booth opposite her, heart pounding as he studied her face, searching for the woman he once knew. She avoided his gaze, tracing the rim of her mug. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Brian let the silence stretch until it cracked. "Why, Megan? Why lie to me?" His voice trembled on the word lie, laden with every unanswered question of the past weeks. Megan swallowed hard, then drew in a ragged breath. "It started innocently," she began. "When I felt alone on set, he was there, just someone to listen." At her words, Brian's vision blurred. "Who?" he demanded. She looked up, tears spilling over. "His name is Lucas, an art director I met 3 months ago. We connected late at night, talking about everything but work." Pain lanced through Brian's chest as he remembered glimpses of a tall, dark-haired man slipping past the guards when he'd trailed her. Megan's fingers shook. "It never should have happened," she said. "But it did." Brian closed his eyes and swallowed bile. Memories flooded back. Megan slipping out of the house at dawn, hurried whispers over the phone, the abandoned seat at their kitchen table. He wanted to scream, to hurt her exactly as she'd hurt him. Yet the woman in front of him looked broken, terrified of her own choices. He wondered if this was the same fierce, confident Megan he'd fallen in love with, or someone he no longer recognized. Gathering himself, Brian asked, "Did it ever mean more to you?" Megan's head dropped. "Yes, more than I wanted it to, but I hate that I let it." Her confession hung between them like smoke. She spoke of lonely nights on location, of seeking comfort in Lucas's company, of kisses that spiraled into something far too real. With each word, Brian felt the foundations of their marriage shudder. When she finished, Megan reached across the table and took his hand. "I want to fix this," she said, voice raw. "I'm tired of running. I love you and our son, more than anything." Brian looked at her palm, so small against his calloused fingers. He saw fear, remorse, and perhaps hope. But he also saw the debris of a betrayal that would take time to clear away. He stood abruptly, squeezing her hand one last time. "I need time," he said quietly. "Trust can't be rebuilt overnight." Megan nodded, tears glistening. As Brian walked out into the cool evening air, he felt the weight of their fractured vows settling on his shoulders. Brian returned home under an overcast sky, the weight of Megan's confession trailing behind him like an unwelcome shadow. Their once sunlit foyer echoed with emptiness. The echo of his own footsteps felt sharper than any words that had been spoken. He stepped through the threshold and hesitated, as though the house itself was a stranger. In the hallway, family portraits still lined the walls, celebratory snapshots of birthdays and vacations, their smiles frozen in time. Tonight, every image whispered of what had been lost. He wandered room to room, avoiding the bed they once shared, and finally settled at the kitchen table, where Megan's lipstick-stained note from Part 1 lay discarded beside an untouched coffee mug. The remnants of their broken promises crowded around him, and he realized that healing would demand more than a single conversation. It would require a willingness to rebuild everything from the ground up. Over the next week, the tension between them crystallized into an uneasy truce. Megan moved out of their bedroom into the spare room to honor Brian's request for space, and they agreed to a strict schedule for communication. Daily check-ins, shared calendars, and honest updates about their locations and emotional states. The first few days were silent except for obligatory texts. "I had a good therapy session," or "I'm picking up groceries for dinner." But each message, however clinical, was a thread slowly woven back into the frayed tapestry of their marriage. Brian filled the quiet hours caring for their son, determined to shield him from the storm, even as he himself felt adrift. Megan threw herself into individual therapy, grappling with the loneliness and ambition that had led her astray. She kept a journal of every thought, every pang of remorse, and every flicker of hope, then shared excerpts with Brian when he was ready. They began co-parenting meetings, sitting side by side at the dining table with sticky notes and color-coded charts detailing school pickups, extracurriculars, and household chores. Their son noticed the change first, Megan's tender goodnights and Brian's hesitant "I love you" under his breath. In those small moments, they discovered that love could still exist beneath the rubble of betrayal, if only they were willing to nurture it together. After 2 weeks of working in parallel, they decided on their first couples counseling session. The therapist's office was a neutral territory, warm lighting, plush chairs arranged in a circle, and a calm presence that felt almost surgical. Megan confessed her deepest shame in a trembling voice, while Brian described the loneliness that had festered inside him, turning suspicion into pain. When the therapist asked them to practice active listening, Brian repeated Megan's admission back to her. "You felt abandoned when I was on set, and that loneliness led you to Lucas." Then Megan mirrored his hurt. "You felt shut out when I wouldn't talk, and that led you to follow me and spy." In that moment of reflection, they recognized the patterns of neglect and mistrust that had cascaded into infidelity. Sessions grew more intense as they tackled issues of boundaries and forgiveness. They established new rules: no secret calls or hidden apps, weekly date nights, even if it meant ordering takeout in sweats, and monthly check-ins to discuss emotional triggers before they boiled over. Megan relinquished all social media passwords for an agreed period, replacing them with open journals she shared at bedtime. Brian, in turn, agreed to curb his impulses to snoop, opting instead for vulnerability. "If I'm worried, I'll tell you, rather than spying." Slowly, the rigidity between them softened into a fragile trust. Weeks turned into months, and one crisp morning, they found themselves laughing together over pancake batter gone awry in their kitchen. Their son sat between them, oblivious to how close they had come to collapse. Brian noticed Megan's eyes crinkle at the corners in the same way they had before the affair, a spark of the woman who had first captivated him. He reached across the counter, brushing a stray flower fingerprint from her cheek, and she responded with a small, genuine smile. It was a turning point, the moment when the distance between you and me began to blur back into us. On the anniversary of their wedding day, they returned to the spot where they had said their vows. There was no grand ceremony, just the two of them exchanging handwritten letters, each acknowledging the pain they had caused and affirming their commitment to trust and growth. As Megan read her letter aloud, tears fell not from shame, but from relief. Brian followed with his, voice steady as he promised to honor her dreams and protect their bond. Under a sky streaked with dawn, they sealed their renewed vows with a quiet kiss. Although the memory of betrayal would never fully fade, they chose to define their future not by past mistakes, but by the courage it took to face them together.